Okay, so let's talk about sentences. The first type is a simple sentence. A simple sentence consists of only an independent clause, as it says right here. It contains a subject, a predicate, and it expresses a complete thought. So, you have your subject with students, and your predicate, or your verb, to study, in the mornings. Those are all add-on phrases that don't necessarily go with your subject or your predicate. B, Juan and Anthony play football every afternoon. Juan and Anthony are your subjects. Play is your verb. Alicia goes to the library and studies every day. Alicia is your subject. Go is your verb. So, subject and predicate in the simple sentences. Cindy and Sue, that's your subject. Two people, but one subject. They both auditioned, so that is your predicate, audition, for the lead role in the play. Now, for the lead role and in the play are both add-on phrases. Number 2, the kittens were adopted by the family. The kittens is your subject. Were adopted is your verb, so that's a simple sentence. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are my favorite. Your sentence or your subject is peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. It's a long one, but it's just one subject. It's one type of thing. Are is your predicate. The committee decorated the gym for Friday night's dance. The committee is your subject. What did they do? They decorated. And the rest just tells about what they did while they were decorating. The surprise party was organized by Wendy's two best friends. The surprise party is your subject. Was organized is your verb or your predicate, and the rest just tells about that and expresses the rest of the complete thought. Now, the next type is a compound sentence. So, it contains two independent clauses. So, those are two clauses that can stand on their own. They are joined by a coordinating conjunction, so for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. And if you need a hint, the first letter, they all spell out fanboys. Except for very short sentences, these conjunctions are always preceded by a comma. So usually if you have a comma, you know that this might be more than a simple sentence. So A, I is your first subject. Tried is your predicate. To speak Spanish finishes off the complete thought. Now you have a coordinating conjunction here, and there's your comma, so that tips you off that something else is going on. It's not just a simple sentence. Now your second set, my friend tried to speak English. My friend is your subject, and tried is your verb. B, Alex played football, so Maria went shopping. Alex is your first subject. What did he do? He played. Football finishes off the complete thought. Then you have that comma that is your indicator and your coordinating conjunction. Then you have Maria went shopping. Maria is your subject. Went is your verb. The class will get a reward for we always behave. Class is your first subject. Will get is your first predicate. You have your comma, that's your tip off. Then you have your coordinating conjunction, and you have your second subject, which is we, and always is your verb. So, the conjunction in each of these usually follows the comma. You have your comma and your so. And then you have your two subjects and your two verbs. I am going. I is your subject. Am going is your verb. To the dance. That finishes off your independent clause. So if you read I am going to the dance, that's a complete sentence. You have to be able to separate them, and if you take everything after the comma so, I have to buy a new dress. I have to buy a new dress is a complete sentence. You can do the same thing with these. Jenny took the pictures and Aaron developed them. Jenny took the pictures is a complete sentence. Aaron developed them is a complete sentence. They are joined by comma and. New York is on the East Coast and California is on the West Coast. Those are two independent clauses. This part of the sentence is a complete sentence. This part of the sentence is also a complete sentence. Bill walked into the crowded room, but I can't find him. Again, these are two complete sentences. They're joined by the comma and the conjunction. Is a party on Friday, or is it on Saturday? Is the party on Friday is a question in itself. Is it on Saturday is also a question, joined by the comma and the or. Now, complex sentences, simple sentences are an independent clause, form a complete thought. They have one subject, one verb. Compound are two independent clauses put together with a comma and a conjunction, two subjects, two verbs. A complex sentence has an independent clause, so it has a simple sentence in it, but it also has a dependent clause in it. So those dependent clauses cannot stand alone. They can't stand on their own. If you take them out of the sentence, they don't make enough sense to just be a sentence all by themselves. So, complex sentences have a subordinating conjunction. So things like because, since, after, although, when, etc. So, they either follow these two formats, dependent clause and then independent clause, or independent clause, dependent clause. Now see, if you put the dependent clause first, you have to put a comma. So, since I have no milk, comma, I'll go to the store. In the other form, I'll go to the store since I have no milk. You don't need the comma there, okay? Because we know that that is leaning on the first independent clause. So, your examples. When he handed in his homework is your dependent clause. If you take that out by itself, when he handed in his homework is not an independent clause. It has to lean on something else to make sense. It has to lean on the he forgot to hand the teacher the last page. That can stand by itself. The first one cannot. So, the next one is the teacher returned the homework. That can stand by itself. That's an independent clause. After is your subordinating conjunction, and she noticed the error cannot stand by itself. So you know that this is an independent and a dependent, making it a complex. The students are studying can stand by itself, so that's an independent. Because they have a test tomorrow is a dependent, because it starts with a subordinating and it does not make sense on its own. The last one is a dependent, then an independent. So after they finish studying, cannot make sense on its own. Jack and Marie went to the movies, however, can. So the dependent clause in each complex sentence, because it was raining, the game was called off. Because is your subordinating conjunction. Because it was raining cannot stand by itself, so it is a dependent clause. The game was called off, however, can stand on its own. It's an independent. So dependent plus independent equals complex. When I feel sick cannot stand on its own. So that's a dependent clause. I do not go to school is an independent clause. Mark is not going since I never invited him. Now, the independent is Mark is not going. That can stand on its own. Has a subject, has a predicate, could be a sentence all by its lonesome. Since I never invited him, it sounds like you're leaving something out. And it has that subordinating conjunction. So that's a dependent clause and therefore a complex sentence. George played football because Jean went shopping. George played football is a thought on its own. That's an independent clause. Because Jean went shopping starts with a subordinating conjunction, and it cannot stand on its own because it sounds like you're waiting for something else. 5. If you want a pizza, you need to order it now. If you want a pizza cannot stand on its own because it needs that you need to order it now. It's a dependent clause. However, you need to order it now is an independent clause, and it can stand on its own. So this sentence, also a complex sentence. The final type of sentence is a compound complex sentence. So Naturally, it combines the elements of compound sentences and complex sentences. Now remember, compound sentences are two independent clauses. A complex sentence is an independent and a dependent. So it contains two independent clauses, kind of like the compound, and one dependent clause, kind of like the complex. You put a comma after the dependent clause if it begins a sentence, or you use no comma if it comes at the end of the sentence. You put a comma before the and, but, or that connects the two independent clauses. So, Charlie could not hear his watch. That can stand on its own. Because it had stopped, cannot. So Charlie could not hear his watch is independent. Because it had stopped is dependent. And he was worried. There's your comma. There's your conjunction. He was worried is also independent. Now the next one. Because it had stopped. There's your subordinating conjunction. Doesn't make sense on its own because it had stopped. Charlie could not hear his watch, however, does. And because the dependent starts the sentence, you have to put a comma after it. So, because it had stopped, comma, Charlie could not hear his watch. This is independent. You also have another comma, so that indicates that you are beginning another independent clause with the coordinating conjunction. He was worried makes sense on its own, so it's an independent. Although Sarah called out for Charlie is a dependent because we have our subordinating conjunction, and this part of the sentence, this dependent, does not make sense on its own. We have a comma because it starts the sentence. No one answered also makes sense on its own. It's an independent clause. Then we have a comma and a coordinating conjunction. So that indicates that we are going to get another independent clause. Sarah was scared, can stand on its own. Sarah could not see Charlie, but when she was on the hilltop, she could hear him cry out. Sarah could not see Charlie can stand on its own. We have a comma and a coordinating conjunction, but then we have a dependent. Okay? The dependent can be moved to the very beginning of the sentence. Okay? When she was on the hilltop does not make sense on its own. She could hear him cry out, however, does. And if you move the when she was on the hilltop to the beginning, it still kind of makes sense. When she was on the hilltop, Sarah could not see Charlie, but she could hear him cry out. Okay? That is the end of your demo for the types of sentences.